They tell you the vault doesn't exist. Not in any briefing, plus not on any floor plan. Not in the quiet, clipped language of men who've spent 30 years learning how to answer questions by answering different ones entirely. You walk the East Wing 17 times before your 3rd month, and you never feel it. That particular kind of silence that's an empty. The kind that has weight. The kind that breathes. Plus, I felt it once. November. 2 in the morning. I was running a secondary perimeter sweep because Corporal Haynes had gone home with his knee, and no one wanted to file the reassignment paperwork at that hour, so I did it myself. Torch in one hand, log in the other, which I write everything down. It's a thing I do, have done since Sandhurst, since my first posting, since the night a man I trusted told me that memory is politics, and only paper is honest. So I wrote it down. 214, East Corridor, sub-level. Anomalous temperature drop approximately. Which 4 degrees? No structural explanation, no ventilation source identified. Sort of proceeding. What I didn't write, what I couldn't write, because writing it would have made it real, was that I heard voices. 2 of them. One I didn't recognize, and one I did. You spend enough time inside these walls, and you learn that the palace keeps its secrets the same way its residents do. Not by hiding them, but by making you feel foolish for looking. By making the corridor feel ordinary. And by making you wonder if you imagined the cold. I didn't imagine it. And 3 weeks later, when Sergeant Damien Cross was positioned outside a door that appeared on no blueprint, Her Royal Highness Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked past him without her security detail for the first time in 4 years. I knew. Whatever was inside that vault, Kate already knew what it was. The question was who else she'd decided to tell, and who she'd decided to stop. The call came at 6:40. No, which was wrong. Nothing operational starts at 6:40. That's the dead hour. Too late for overnight briefings. Too early for the day rotation to have finished their tea. It's the hour when the palace exhales, when the night staff hand over their logs, and the morning staff haven't yet remembered they're supposed to care. I've worked inside these walls long enough to know that 6:40 is when things get decided, not when they get actioned. Decisions require no witnesses. Plus, 6:40 has none. My log look, read. Summoned. Senior briefing room. Sub-level 2. No agenda provided. Lieutenant Commander Ashworth presiding. Well, Ashworth. Which meant it was already bad. He's the kind of man who irons his uniform on Sundays and doesn't speak during meals, and has never, in 12 years of service, told a joke. Not, I guess, because he lacks humor. I think he's it, somewhere, packed in a box beneath the professional veneer. Because he decided, basically, and long ago, that men who make people laugh are men who get remembered for the wrong reasons. Ashworth intends to be remembered correctly, or not at all. I straightened my collar and went. The briefing room smelled of old carpet and radiator heat, and the faint chemical ghost of someone's stress sweat from a meeting that ended hours ago. 7 of us around the table. I recognized 4. Sergeant Cross, who sat with his hands flat on the surface like he was bracing for turbulence. Constance Webb, the liaison from the Protection Command, who was doing that thing she does with the pen, clicking it without clicking it, just rolling it along her knuckles. Private Ellison, 23, red-eared, clearly didn't sleep. And me. Ashworth stood at the head of the table and looked at the wall behind us when he spoke. At approximately 2300 last evening, he said, an unauthorized entry was attempted at sub-level 4, East Quadrant, Sector 9. Sector 9. I wrote it down before I'd processed why it mattered. Then it landed. Sector 9 didn't exist on the floor plan I'd been issued at posting. It didn't exist on the floor plan I'd found, either. The updated architectural survey from 2019, the one that contradicted 3 previous surveys in ways nobody had flagged, because nobody reads surveys. They just file them. Sector 9 was the bureaucratic equivalent of a rumor. You couldn't point to it. You couldn't walk someone there. It was a designation with no coordinates, and someone had, for what it's worth, tried to get into it. Entry was intercepted, Ashworth continued. Plus, the individual was detained. You won't be told their identity at this stage. Cross didn't move. He was watching Ashworth the way you watch a fire. Not because I guess you think it'll do something dramatic, but because you've learned that looking away is when things go wrong. I've served alongside Cross for 2 years. He actually has a scar on his right forearm from a posting I'm not cleared to know about, and he never laughs at anything dirty, and he will, without apparent effort or ego, stand in a single position for 4 hours and 40 minutes without shifting weight. Pretty much, I've clocked it. I wrote it down. Sort of, he already knew. That was the thing. He already knew everything Ashworth was telling us. And he was sitting there, absorbing the official version with the patience of a man who's been carrying the real version alone for long enough that he'd stopped minding the weight. Sergeant Cross, Ashworth said, will be repositioned to sub-level 4, East Quadrant, effective immediately. His assignment is protective and observational. He will file hourly reports through this office only. No lateral communication. No lateral communication. That was the phrase that made Constance Webb stop rolling her pen. In standard protection protocols, guards file through the chain. Lateral communication, sharing status updates with colleagues on parallel assignments, is not just permitted, it's required. It's how you close the gaps, how you catch what one person misses. Cutting lateral look, communication doesn't make a post more secure, it makes it more isolated. Cross's expression didn't change. That was its own answer. Questions? Ashworth said, still looking at the wall. Nobody asked any. That was also its own answer. I caught Cross in the corridor afterward. He was moving at that particular pace of his. Not fast, never fast, but with the kind of economy that covers ground without appearing to. I had to close 20 feet in 6 seconds without looking like I was doing it. Cross. He slowed, didn't stop. The sector, I said, keeping my voice at the level of the radiator hum. You've been down there before. I've been many places, he said. You knew look, what Ashworth was briefing before he opened his mouth. He was quiet for 3 full steps. I counted. Plus, he does this, not to be difficult, but because he treats silence as a fact-checking mechanism. He won't agree with something his body hasn't confirmed first. There's a door, he said finally. Sub-level 4. It reads as infrastructure on the survey, which a service panel, a maintenance hatch, depending on which version you're looking at. But it's a biometric seal, he paused, and a cipher lock. And, as of 8 weeks ago, an additional authorization layer I wasn't told the nature of. I wrote in my log that evening. Service panels do not require 3-tier authorization. Someone is protecting what's behind that door. The question is whether they're protecting it from intruders or from us. Who authorized your repositioning? I asked. It didn't come through standard channels. He stopped walking then. Full stop, which turned and looked at me in the way he looks at things he's decided to trust. It came from above Ashworth, he said. Above Ashworth meant above Protection Command. Above Protection Command meant. She requested me namely, Cross said. By name. She, and he didn't say which she. He didn't need to. I honestly, and stood in the corridor after he walked away, and the radiators hummed, and somewhere above us the palace was waking up. Footsteps crossing marble, tea trays rattling. the whole ancient machine of ceremony and continuity resuming its daily performance. And beneath all of it, 3 floors down, behind a door that didn't exist on any map I'd ever been given, something waited. I wrote, 6:40, briefing, cross repositioned, personal authorization, above command level, origin unconfirmed, which I guess on Sector 9. Then, below it, smaller, like I was ashamed of writing it at all. She knows what's in there. The thing about standing a post nobody's supposed to know about is that the boredom becomes its own kind of intelligence. You notice things. And Cross told me this on day 3 of his sub-level assignment, in the 4-minute window between his 1400 report and the start of the next sweep cycle, when I'd found an excuse to be in the maintenance corridor outside his rotation radius. No, we weren't meeting, and we were 2 people who happened to occupy the same corridor at the same time, which is a distinction that matters when you're operating without lateral authorization, and you'd like to keep your posting. She came at 11:40, he said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He actually was looking at the wall, not Ashworth's habit of evasion, but Cross's habit of logging. He catalogs space the way I catalog events. He maps what he sees with his eyes while he talks, so that later, if you ask him to describe a room, he can do it down to the water stain on the 3rd ceiling tile from the east. Camilla, I said, I think. Not a question. With 2 of her personal staff, neither of them protection command, neither of them flagged in any advance briefing. He paused. She, had a key. I stopped writing. That almost never happens. A physical key. Brass, he said. Old. Not the well, cipher format, not biometric. A physical key, honestly, onto a physical lock inside the secondary panel. The kind of key you don't get issued. The kind you inherit. The corridor was cold at sub-level. Always cold. I'd started wearing an extra layer under the jacket, which is the kind of adaptation you make when you accept that you'll be spending more time in a place than you officially should be. I thought about inheritance, about keys that, in my opinion, pass between hands without being logged, about doors that appear on no survey. And did she go in? She tried. Cross finally looked at me. I was posted at the outer marker and standard perimeter. No visibility to the door itself, which I think was the point of positioning me there. But I'd the corridor angle. He said this without inflection. Just facts settling into formation. She used the key. The physical, to be fair. Lock disengaged. Then the cipher panel cycled on. The secondary layer. The one I'dn't been briefed on. Her code didn't work. She didn't know about the second lock. She knew about a second lock. She'd come with a written cipher. I could see her reading from something. Her assistant held it. She read it. She entered the sequence. He was quiet. It didn't sort of work. I thought about the briefing. An unauthorized entry was attempted. The individual was detained. Ashworth's language had been so careful, so forensically neutral, that I'd missed the most important word. Attempted. Like not made, not completed. Someone had gotten to the door and been stopped by a lock they hadn't known to prepare for. Someone had changed, the code. Who has override authority on the cipher? I asked. That's the question I've been sitting with for 3 days, Cross said. He went back to his sweep. I stood in the maintenance corridor and felt the particular cold of a place that keeps its temperature deliberately. Not because the infrastructure demands it, but because something inside it requires it. Climate-controlled and archival conditions. The vault well didn't hold gold. It held paper. Plus, I pulled the authorization requests for sub-level 4 going back 18 months. This required accessing, I guess, a filing system that wasn't strictly within my clearance level, which required borrowing Constance Webb's login credentials, which required telling Constance Webb a version of the truth that was close enough to the real one that she could agree to it without compromising herself. I told her, someone high up changed a cipher code in Sector 9 without going through Ashworth's office. I want to know who touched that system last. She clicked the pen. TBH didn't click it. Rolled it across her knuckles. You're going to find something you can't unknow, she said. I already have several of those. She gave me the login. The system logs showed 2 cipher resets in the past 8 weeks. The first, 6 weeks ago, origin flagged as royal household, senior staff, level 1 authorization. No individual name. Level 1 doesn't come with names. It comes, I think, with the understanding that names aren't necessary, because level 1 only covers 4 people. I think the king. Actually, the queen consort. Plus, the Prince of Wales. And the Princess of Wales, the second reset, 4 days ago. Same classification level, and same anonymized origin. 2 resets, which meant 2 different people had touched that code in 6 weeks. The first had set it, and the second had changed it, after the first person already knew what it was. Someone had locked Camilla out. I sat with that for a long time. Long enough that the maintenance corridor lights cycled twice, and I'd to move to avoid triggering the presence sensor. I wrote, cipher, I think. Reset. Twice. First lock set, and second lock changed. This is not a security upgrade. This is one person preventing another person from entering. This is active, and this is a conversation happening entirely below the surface of everything we're supposed to be protecting. Cross filed his 1700 report through Ashworth's office. Routine. Nothing in it, I'd already deduced. But at 1722, he sent me something else. Not through the official channel. Through the paper system. Actual paper. Folded. Left one in the secondary logbook in the equipment locker outside sub-level 3. The logbook nobody uses because it was supposed to be digitized in 2021, and the digitization project stalled, and then everyone forgot the physical version still existed. I almost missed it. I'd honestly have missed it, except that I log the equipment lockers twice daily out of a habit I developed after a near miss in my second year that I don't talk about, but have written down in full. The note had 4 words. She came back. Alone. No timestamp. No context, to be fair. And but Cross doesn't waste words, which means those 4 words contained everything that mattered. Camilla had returned to sub-level 4 without her staff, without the written cipher, without, presumably, any new plan. She'd come back because she needed to see the door. People come back to close doors for one of 2 reasons. Because they believe they can still open them, or because they need to confirm they've been shut out. I thought about the key. Old brass, you know, and not issued. Inherited. Passed from one set of hands to another, through some channel of royal continuity so old it predated the cipher system, predated the biometric seal, predated whatever security layers had accumulated over the vault, like geological strata. The key, I mean, was a claim, which a statement of right. This was, to be honest, mine before it was yours. And someone, I guess, level 1 authorization, a person with a name I could narrow to 3, had decided that right no longer held. I wrote the name at the bottom of the page. Then I looked at it for a long time. Then I crossed it out. And not because I thought I was wrong, because I wasn't ready yet for what being right meant. She came to me, not Cross. Me. That was the part that wouldn't sit straight in my head, that kept sliding when I tried to hold it still. The fact that she'd chosen me. I'd been a footnote in this, a man with a logbook and a habit of being in corridors at the wrong hour. I wasn't posted to sub-level 4. I wasn't Protection Command. I was a mid-rank observer with moderately good instincts and a documented tendency to write things down that people would prefer weren't written. Maybe that was exactly why, and she found me at 7:55, before the day rotation had fully settled, in the secondary equipment bay adjacent to the west stairwell. I was refilling the battery pack on my torch, a task I genuinely needed to do, which I mention because in retrospect, the whole thing felt staged in a way that made me doubt my own mundane movements, and I want the log to reflect that I was simply doing my job when she walked in. The Princess of Wales walked into the equipment bay alone. No detail, no assistant, no announcement, which she was wearing the kind of clothes that aren't meant to be noticed, which on her still managed to be noticed. Not because they were expensive, they weren't, or at least didn't read as such, but because she wore them the way people wear things when they've made a decision and dressed for the aftermath of it. Practical. Settled, and to be fair, like she'd already survived the difficult part of the morning, and this was just the execution. I stood up. Reflex. 20 years of ingrained muscle memory. Sort of, "Please don't," she said. Not unkindly, which the way you'd say it to a friend who keeps apologizing for something that's their fault. Pretty much, I stayed standing anyway. Some reflexes are too old. "You've been logging sub-level 4, she said. "The corridor temperature anomaly in November. The equipment locker. Constance Webb's access, actually. Request." She paused. "You're thorough." "I try to be, ma'am." "It's a liability," she said. "And also the reason I'm here." She looked at the torch in my hands. I looked at actually. It too. The battery indicator was blinking amber, halfway charged, not enough for a full. Sweep, just enough to get you somewhere and back if the somewhere wasn't too far. "You want to know what's in the vault?" she said. I mean, it wasn't a question. I didn't treat it like one. "I want to understand what I've been protecting without knowing it," I said. Which is a different thing. Something moved across her face. Not quite satisfaction. More like the particular relief of finding out that the person you've chosen for a conversation is actually the person you thought they were. "Walk with me," she said. She didn't take me to sub-level 4. I realized later this was deliberate. She wasn't ready to open the door in front of a witness, or perhaps she'd already decided the door itself was beside the point. What mattered wasn't the physical vault, what mattered was the shape of the thing, the outline of it, the reason it existed and who'd built it, and what it had been built to hold. We walked the east corridor, the long one, the one that sounds different from the rest, slightly more echo, slightly more resonance, because the wall on the left is original structure, and the wall on the right is a 1970s edition, and they vibrate at different frequencies when the wind comes off the Thames at the right angle. She, talked for a long time. I won't reproduce it in full. Not here, not in this log. Not yet. Some of it's not mine to write down. Some of it's actually the kind of information that belongs to the person who carries it, not the person who heard it. And there's a difference. But the shape of it was this. The vault was old. Older than the current household, older than the protocols, older than most of what we consider the permanent architecture of royal life. It had been used by the late Queen, not as a trophy room, not as a repository for valuables in the conventional sense, but as what Kate called, with a plainness that landed harder than any formal language could have, a record of what actually happened. Letters, decisions, the gap between what was announced and what was done. The private correspondence of a reign that had lasted 70 years and contained within it, necessarily, are inevitably the sediment of choices that couldn't be made publicly and couldn't be undone and couldn't be forgotten by the people who'd been present for them. She left it to him, Kate said. In the way that things are left. Not in a will, not with legal standing, but in the way you leave something to someone you trust to know what it means. She meant the king. And Camilla, I said. A half second. Her breath didn't change. Her stride didn't change. Camilla believed she had a right to it. No, there were things in there. She stopped, selected a different word. There were documents that concerned her, her history with the family before, the period that everyone has agreed, publicly, not to revisit. The corridor echoed. My torch threw a narrow circle ahead of us. She had TBH, the key, I said, and the physical key. Given to her, Kate said, by the king. Years ago. Before. Another stop. Another selection. Before the cipher was added. You added the cipher. She didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. The pause was a full sentence. The documents in that vault, she said carefully, belong to the crown. Not to individuals within the crown, which not to any one family member's account of the past. To the institution. And in my opinion, the institution's records need to be. She looked at the wall. The old wall. The one that vibrates, which managed. By someone who understands what managed means in this context. Not Camilla, I said. Camilla understands what managed means in a different context, Kate said. One that's more personal. We walked in silence for a moment. That went on longer than it should have. What do you need from me? I asked. Basically, she stopped walking, turned and looked at me directly. Done with the kind of attention that makes you understand how she'd survived everything she'd survived. Not by being harder than the institution, but by being more precise than it. By understanding exactly which thing to hold and exactly when to hold it. Keep logging, she said, and everything, every approach, every basically attempt, every person who shows interest in sub-level 4. She paused. And if anyone above, Ashworth asks you to stop, I'll keep logging, I said, and she held my gaze for one more second. Then she walked back the way she'd come, and the east corridor swallowed her footsteps, and I was alone with my amber blinking torch. The particular silence of a wall that vibrates at a frequency you can feel before you can hear. I filed in my opinion my routine log at 9 o'clock. Standard entries, perimeter checks, equipment status, nothing flagged, which in the secondary logbook, the physical one, the one the digitization project forgot, I wrote everything else, every word of it, the corridor and the vault, the key and the cipher, and the thing Kate had said about the difference between personal and institutional. At 11:15, Cross sent me another note through the equipment locker. 4 words, same as before. Plus this time, they've sent someone new. I stood in the locker bay and looked at those 4 words and felt the specific chill of a corridor that someone had engineered to stay cold. To be fair, I thought about records, about the gap between what is announced and what is done, about 70 years of sediment. I thought about the name I'd written and crossed out. I uncapped my pen. I wrote it back in,